Hey, everybody. I want to thank everybody for setting the time, setting the schedule, and for showing up. I am here with Kyisha Mclemore, my good friend. She is an advocate. She is one of the best teachers I have ever met.
No.
And I just want to kind of introduce her. And then, actually, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till some more people come in. But I'm going to take this time to answer a commonly asked question. So whoever's not here is going to have to wait for the playback. I want to, and this time, make sure that I answer a commonly asked question. Hey, Ashley. I see you, girl. So when I do these things afterwards, I get a lot of inboxes and things. They ask me questions. And one of the things that I'm most commonly asked is, why did I stay in abuse? I want to answer that. I stayed in an abusive relationship, even though I knew for a fact that obviously it could kill me and how detrimental it was to my health and all these other good things or bad things, was because bondage is real. And for those of you who kind of know my background, you've probably heard me say this, but domestic violence is like being in jail. So I love this person and I loved him so much that him beating me was okay, became okay as long as I got a gift behind it. So I would get beat and then receive a gift. So you get harm and then you get the prize behind it. And then also I blame myself because I take responsibility for the part I played in it, which was I was part of the arguing. I was part of the backbiting. I was part of the, let me see what I can do to get him back. I played a role in it as well. And then somehow, in some areas of my abuse, I began to blame myself and began to believe that I deserved it. Mm-hmm. So that's on the forefront. On the back end, in my childhood, I was abused. I was groomed for abuse. We don't talk about that a lot, but if you look in the background or in the history of people who have experience or are going through domestic violence, a lot of it stems from being groomed for abuse. And so as a child, I was molested, I was beat, I was emotionally abused, physically abused, and spiritually abused because I'm a person, I'm a child of God, and I have a spirit, the spirit of God. And so I was spiritually abused. And so transitioning to somebody who beat me was just like, oh, well. So the first time he hit me and said he was sorry, I believed it. Mm-hmm. And so, again, that's one of my most commonly asked questions. Why did I stay in abuse? And the short answer is bondage is real. Domestic violence, for those who do not know, I firmly believe that domestic violence is demonic. But yes, thank you so much for those who have asked me that question. And I hope those who are watching either live or watching playback later, I hope that kind of helps you understand why I do what I do. Because freedom, just like bondage is real, freedom is real, and there is a life after domestic violence, and God can still use you. Human beings were created for a purpose and with the purpose, and we have to execute that purpose. And so in all the years of my domestic violence, when the Lord delivered me from it, I decided that I owe God my life. And I gave him my youth, my strength, my being, my thoughts, and my emotions. So that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. So with that being said, let me introduce my super good friend, Kyisha Mclemore. She is so down to earth. I absolutely love her. She's so caring, so kind. And you know what? Before I introduce her and tell you about her credentials, let me tell you about an experience, how dope this chick is. We were at a Joyce Myers conference a couple of years ago, and I will never, ever forget. This woman walked up to us, and you might not remember it. I remember it. She walked up to us, and I think she was like asking us for money or something. Hey, Carrie, I see you, girl. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Paula. Hey, Tasha. Hey, girl. But the lady walked up to us, and all she was doing was asking for something. And then she started having a conversation, and she was talking about, her girlfriend was beating her, or if they were fighting, and Kyisha said, you know, that's domestic violence. And she just began to break down like, no, if she's hitting you, this is domestic violence. Like she went through the whole entire, basically in 5 minutes, talking to the lady, went through the whole training, identified what it was, told her about resources, and just was like, no, you don't deserve it. And you know what? Hey, Carrie was there. My ex-boyfriend would show up at my job and Carrie would be there. So, hey, girl, getting distracted. Sorry, y'all. So let me read my friend's credentials. Kyisha is a certified domestic violence professional. She has her Bachelor's of Science degree in Human Service Management from the University of Phoenix. She's actually a manager with the South Suburban Family Shelter, and I love them. She's an advocate and a manager there. And basically what she does, she oversees the staff of medical advocates that serve in hospitals throughout South Suburban. She is a teacher, gifted teacher, and she trains on the dynamics and medical aspects of domestic violence, as well as educating representatives on the importance of domestic violence services in medical fields. So this woman, what they do, guys, is they actually go into the hospitals. And hey, Evangelist Renee, but they go into the hospitals, and I'll let her explain further, but they go into the hospitals and they basically, do you guys like go into the rooms and talk to the women, or kind of tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, first of all, we go into every hospital. We try to go and have contact with as many patients as we can. So a patient could come there for the common cold and or the flu or whatever it may be. They may have sprung their ankle, and we go in and we screen them for domestic violence. We find out we build a quick rapport with them. And we find out in a short amount of time, have they ever experienced domestic violence? It could have been in the past or in the present. And we also offer them different services that they need. And if they have not ever experienced domestic violence, we educate them on domestic violence. And 9 times out of 10, 1 out of 3 females experience domestic abuse. And so if it's a room full of 4 females, 1 out of 3 of us have experienced it. And so I like to pull out statistics with that. So that's pretty much what my staff do.
Got you. So can I ask you, how did you realize that this was a gift, and like this was your thing, that this was your, were you in an abusive relationship? How did you? Yeah, that's so weird. I knew you weren't, but it's just so, I can advocate for it because I know about it. You know what I'm saying? But how this is someone like you?
Well, I like helping people. And so human service is part of helping people and teaching and giving directions. And so I've had other jobs as far as child support. And so it's always helping people. And so once I get that niche on how I can help somebody, and of course I have seen domestic violence growing up, you know, my family members fighting and different things like that. But I didn't know it was domestic violence. I just always thought that they were just fighting, you know, fighting each other. And so, when I got the opportunity to get the position, I just thrived with it and learned as much as I could because, I mean, I believe in helping people. And we do see some individuals in the ER that are, you know, come right out of the abuse, you know, some black eyes, some bruised lips, some cuts, whatever the case may be. I have seen it all.
Got you. I do have a question. How has COVID affected how has it impacted domestic violence?
Well, when COVID first hit, we know that a lot of times victims get out of the house basically by going either to the hospital, to the grocery stores, taking their kids to school. But when COVID first hit, everybody was in the house. And so it was very high. And me personally and my staff, we were very concerned about those individuals that were locked in their house with their abuser. And we've had numerous stories where some survivors didn't make it, or a lot of the individuals ended up going into emergency shelter during that time of COVID because they had to get away from their abuser.
Gotcha.
So it impacted us really. It was on a very high increase.
Okay. In that situation, or when there were victims what did that look like? And I'm asking before we jump in, because I have had women reach out to me, and I know that with the impact of COVID, they were not taking women in shelters, and it was very, very difficult for me to refer. And at that point, they were only putting you in a hotel. The shelter, they were not taking anybody new. So what did that process look? And if a woman is trying to find help, where would she go?
Well, the organization that I work for, we don't have a shelter to put women in. So we do house them in hotels anyway. So that's how we do it. And so we did have a high increase in that. And we felt as though that it would be more safe, because although you're in a hotel, you're also in your own living quarters with your own family versus being in a living space with 50 or 20 other women. And so, with that being said, that's not my department. I don't do that part. But from my understanding is that it was on the high, and then we had to have a social worker daily go to the hospitals. They were, go to the hotels, and they were bringing different needs that the individuals needed. And so we had to get grant money to go be able to give them gas cards, to be able to give them Walmart cards if they needed diapers. So all of those things, it really became a blessing because the community really poured in, and we were able to bless those ladies that were inside of our hotel shelters.
Got it. Ashley has a question. How do you deal with victims of domestic violence who are scared to report because of their fear of law enforcement?
Well, when I always let individuals know that anything you tell me is confidential and safe. And so whatever they tell me, it does not leave out of their room, not unless they want to disclose it. I always let them know that they don't have to talk to law enforcement, but I also tell them to document everything. So if you are in an altercation with your abuser and you have a black eye, I encourage them to take pictures, and I do encourage them to call the police, because the police will say, well, she never called us, or she never did this. So you always want to have some type of track record. But my main thing is to give the person the support that they need. I'm not there to judge them. I'm there to believe them and to support them in whatever decision they want to make. So if they don't want to call the police, I'm not going to force them, but I will educate them to let them know, take pictures. Try to have a safety plan for yourself. Find out what triggers, because the abuser knows the cycle. Like what you were saying earlier, Charity, that was called the cycle of violence. It's a honeymoon phase, and then it's the storm is getting ready to hit, and then the storm comes, and then it's right back to the honeymoon stage. And a lot of times women or survivors find themselves in that stage because men experience it as well. Yep. Keep a paper trail. Yes.
and hey, Angie, this is Sasha Zoe. She said pictures are so powerful. You brought up something that I really, really want to talk about, and you talked about it in a training that we did a couple of years ago, and it was creating a plan. You said, if I remember, if you can't get out immediately, create the plan of escape. Can you tell us, what does that plan look like? What is that process? Can you go into more detail?
Sure. Like, we're not there to destroy families, but we are there for the individuals and their safety. And so sometimes individuals are not ready to leave, and it may not even be safe for them to go to a shelter. Just think about putting yourself from your home into a shelter. You're leaving all of your belongings. Your kids are misplaced from school and different things like that. And so right now may not be the right time. And most times, not going to say most times, but the most dangerous time for individuals when they leave their abuser. And so we oftentimes try to train women to keep a plan, make a safety plan, maybe put documentations somewhere else, or have money stashed away somewhere else that, just make a plan, whatever plan fits for you so that you can have an escape goal. And so I try to go through and brainstorm with that individual depending on their particular case and situation. I remember I had a young lady who her abuser tracked her everywhere, and she didn't have her kids' school records. She didn't have any type of documentation. And immediately my mind thought, go to the school and ask them for a copy of everything, and store it somewhere with a friend that's safe, so that you can at least have that information, because you should have that information.
Can I ask you, you brought up a friend that's safe. Can you tell us how a friend or a family member, how can they support someone who's being abused?
The main thing they can do is be a listening ear and a not judgmental
Amen.
ear. And I know sometimes we just want to say, why are you with him? Shake yourself loose, get out of it. But the main thing that I would also like to stress is to let them know that I'm concerned about your safety. This is what I'm seeing. Um, I'm here for you if you need me to be here for you. I'm a supportive ear. If you need me to help you brainstorm, if you need me to help you make a plan, even if that person is just telling you what their individual is doing, just always let them know that I'm concerned about your safety. This sounds like domestic violence to me. And that's the main thing, because they're not going to leave, you know.
Right.
Sometimes they do, sometimes it take one hit, it depends, but they say up to 7 to 10 times before a survivor decides to actually leave.
You know what I want to say this, what you don't say to somebody who's being beat. Don't tell them what you would do if you was in their position.
Exactly.
If I were you, I would do something. No, you don't know what you would do.
No.
Because domestic violence has layers to it. And we oftentimes see the portion of domestic violence that involves beating. It is. Behind closed doors, we don't see the emotional abuse, the financial abuse, the let me use your credit to get this, that type of abuse. Let me withhold funds. Let me withhold things, and let me intimidate you. We don't see that, and we're so quick to say what you would do, or I can't believe it. So just to kind of recap what Kyisha is saying from a survivor's perspective, nobody in domestic violence wants to hear what you would do.
No.
What we do want to hear is listening, because I recall my sister Crystal. She prayed for me. Actually, she prayed for me about 13 years for me to be saved. And during that process, I went through. She walked me through domestic violence, and she never ever once told me what she would do. But what she did was she listened to me. She prayed for me, and she gave me words of wisdom.
Yep.
Godly wisdom. She saved, sanctified, so she gave me a lot of godly wisdom. And during a time of my silent times, my quiet times, when I would sit back, it would play back the things she told me, and her kindness, and those things. So we don't know, because we don't know the impact of our words on people and how it's going to affect them. Don't tell nobody what you would do.
And then I also want to say, like when you were saying, we always look at it as the physical signs that we can see. And I like to educate a lot of doctors and individuals about the signs that we can't see. And that is the emotional scars. That is the headaches that they may have had from being strangled 10 years ago. And they keep having this reoccurring headache. And that's because a lot of times we look at football players and we know that they have concussions, but we don't look at domestic violence survivors as having those. And a lot of times their heads may have been injured in an incident, and it can cause concussions. And later on, those concussions can cause Zizro's effects down the road. Thank you. And so a lot of times we don't look back on that. And so every time you're strangled, if you're strangled, you lose oxygen to your brain. And so some of those brain cells, in fact, die. And that's a lot of times, a lot of victims always say, I couldn't breathe. And next thing I know, it was black. And I remember coming back, and that's because you were strangled and the oxygen actually left. And that can cause headaches years later. So I like to educate individuals on the effects of it.
You know what? When I'm listening to you, I feel so emotional because I remember having a concussion and not knowing it. And I was in college, and I just was sleeping. I knew my head hurt so bad. And it wasn't until maybe the next semester, when I did research on anatomy and physiology, that I realized, girl, you had a whole concussion.
Right.
I could have died.
Yeah.
I could have died. And then I think about, they don't talk about because I was thrown. He threw me a lot. We were just talking about this, guys. If you ever have seen any of my pictures, or even if you could see me talking now, my jaw is crooked because I was hit so much in my face, and so my jaw is crooked, and it's to the point where even when I find myself when I eat, I kind of have to readjust it. And these are residual effects from domestic violence. I have PTSD, which is, it causes me difficulty when I'm processing things, and there is an effect. And I'm still experiencing it years later, and that's why I'm like getting emotional. Like, this is real. Like, we see somebody I remember seeing people on the street before I was in a relationship, they arguing, they fighting, and me thinking it's okay when it wasn't. I should have called 911. I should have got to a safe place and called 911 and said where I saw it at. You know what I'm saying? Which brings me to my next question. How does, if I'm, like, for instance, if I'm seeing abuse, whether it be on the street or in my home, if I'm a bystander, how can I effectively call 911 but still keep myself safe? And I asked that because as I was creating brochures for domestic violence, I read that it's very common for the people that are trying to help that they end up passing away. They're the ones that are killed. So do you have any feedback for someone maybe trying to help, or like they are there, this is happening? What does that person do?
What do you mean? You saying like if you're a bystander, it's not like you gave me two ones. Like if you're a bystander or you're a family member, which one? Both or?
So answer the first one. I'm sorry, girl. So the first one, if I'm a bystander, so I'm walking home from dinner or just driving past and I see a woman or a man being beaten, and I know I want to help. As a human being, what would you recommend? Like, what would it do?
The main thing that I will absolutely say is you want to keep your distance because you want to be safe. But I would definitely say, hey, this is not okay. I'm going to call 911 and I'm calling them now. So you vocalize it so that you can let them know that you're going to call 911 and you call 911 because that's the most thing that you can do in that particular case if you're a bystander. Okay. I don't, me personally, that's what I would do. I'm always going to say something like, that's not okay. That's, are you safe? Or, call the police, because that's one of the saddest stories that I hear a lot of survivors say, that their abuser was beating them down the street and nobody stopped or nobody said anything. Nobody tried to help. And that just breaks my heart, so that's number one. If it's a family member, and I also always hear that people say that I'm not getting involved because all they're going to do is just get right back with the person. And so not knowing that they don't know that that's called the cycle of violence. But like I said, I will always say, look, this is not safe. Call 911. And that's the best that you can do in that situation, because at the end of the day, it's still going to be up to the individual, especially if they're grown.
And then also too, it's not your business whether or not they go back. What your business is, if you're watching something, then your responsibility as a decent human being is to call 911. It's not our business. That portion of it, I feel, and that's where I learned, because people would see me getting beat. I would be coming home from school and he would rip my book bag off my back and just beat me. And I would be like, so we just going to watch this? So this is appropriate? This is what we do? And I would fight back. Don't get me wrong. I would fight back. But I think that people seeing me fight back made them feel like, oh, they're mutually fighting. But that's still toxic. It's still unhealthy. It still shouldn't happen. Yeah. So, okay. So say if I am at a party or something and I see domestic violence. Or if I'm at like I remember you shared with us in the beginning, a family member, like you saw family members fighting. If you're of age and mature enough to know that this is not the right thing, what is the responsibility? Because I say responsibility because we all have a responsibility to say something when we see something that is not right. This is life or death. So what is our responsibility?
Well, definitely, like I said, you want to try. It depends on I'm not going to tell everybody what to do with their family.
Right.
But me per
Okay.
se, I'm going to try to break it up, or I'm going to most definitely say, hey, I'm calling 911. This is not okay. And
Gotcha.
so that's the main thing, because you want to stay safe. You have to stay safe in this as well. And so the best thing that you can do is call 911 and be there as a support, because a lot of times the victims don't want you to call because they know the effects of it once you do call, because they know their abuser. They know that he may be incarcerated, and he may be the main sole provider for the home. So they may cut off their food. They may cut off their rent. If he's in jail, who's going to pay rent? Who's going to pay the light? Who's going to pay the gas? And so a lot of those things, they have to think about those different effects. And that's what they're thinking about versus I'm trying to be safe. And so you have to definitely help them, talk to that individual with that. But the best thing you can do is call 911.
Got you. Got you. So to add to that, I also recommend leaving, then calling. I will excuse yourself. Like I have found I will excuse myself. Like, oh, okay, this is what we okay, and I will leave and then call 911 because, like you said, to your point, safety is important. And if you got a man or a woman that's willing to beat on somebody in front of other people, they really don't care at this point. They don't care about their lives. They don't care about this person's livelihood at all. And I wanted I think you touched a little bit about it, but when a survivor has children, so say if a woman is not ready to leave, because this time I wasn't ready to leave. It took me 6 years, and God had to come in and swoop me out of that, because otherwise I feel like I'd still be in it. If it wasn't for the Lord who was on my side.
Yes, I know that's right.
Because he threatened my life so much. But for someone who's not ready to leave, perhaps she has children, but she's contemplating, like she knows, okay, this is a 911 situation. My children are involved. My children are in danger. What is your recommendation to her to further protect herself outside of like creating a plan? Is there anything that she can possibly do to try to protect herself? I know you said the escape plan, but what if she's not ready to leave?
But 9 times out of 10, when a woman is ready to leave and she has children, it's because of her children, because she's starting to see the effect of what's happening to her kids, and so then she tries to therefore make a plan to escape. And a lot of times, a lot of women, they want to stay because maybe they didn't have a father that grew up in the house, and they don't want to break up their home with with them not having a father. And so it's tons of reason why they stay. But 9 times out of 10, where you get the change of it is when you start talking about the side effects for their kids and how they're witnessing this vicarious trauma, how they are either experiencing it secondhand. Because I always say kids either take on the trait of the perpetrator or the victim when they grow up. And so I also stress to them that please get your children counseling, so that they may be able to deal with what's going on, because they may not be able to express it the way that they're seeing this, but they don't know how to express it. So I always encourage them, even if you don't want to leave right now, get counseling, seek counseling for yourself, and seek counseling for your children as well. And so once they go through the counseling process, then they're making that change, and they're making this change if they're going to stay, and if they're going to leave. So that's what I always encourage them to do: get counseling for their little ones.
Oh, I love that. And I did not know. Someone said, or they take on both traits.
Yes, that's true.
I don't have any children. Thank God. I was thinking, I was like, thank God he didn't get me pregnant. Thank God. Thank Jesus. So I didn't have the children aspect of it, but it's frightening to think that your child could take on the abuser's traits.
And not only that, Charity, that sometimes the kids also take on, like, say, for instance, I just lost my train of thought. Keep going. It'll come back. Go ahead.
Okay. You know what? But it made me think about my exes. He watched his father beat his mother. And so, although not all of his, not all of his brothers were abusive, but he watched his father beat his mama. And I think, and he would oftentimes tell me, well, I didn't black your eye. ain't black your eye, you not beat you, you strong, you can take it. Like, boy, I can't take it.
Mm-hmm.
And Paula said yes. When he began threatening to kill me and my children, I knew it was
See,
time.
that's when they say when I knew it was time, when he started bringing my kids in there, it's time for us to go. This is over.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's 100%. I wish that thought would come back. It just wouldn't, but I was on the road with it. It'll come back.
Yeah, it will come back. And you know what? It's and a lot of it is learned behavior.
Yes, it is.
I 100% agree. What would you tell, say if I'm my 17-year-old self, because that's when I started dating this guy. What would you tell the 17-year-old me who was entering into a domestic violence? What what are the signs that I should look out for in a potential mate?
Yeah. So like I always, when I run into a patient that's in a hospital room with their teens, we have a cycle of, it's called a teen wheel. And I go over every piece of the pie with the teenager, and I let them know if you are experiencing anything, if he's being jealous or, it's a whole bunch of things that's on his wheel. And I always say, this is not love. This is not, you're worthy. You always want to uplift them. So you want to tell them the warning signs, right away, in the beginning. Teen dating violence is very high.
Yes, it is.
And I let them know that it's a lot of teenagers that go through this. You're not alone. You're not the first, but this is this wheel, and it's the teen dating violence. So if you can look it up, it's called the teen dating violence wheel. And I go over each piece of the pie. And I also like to go over, it's called a power control wheel with a lot of domestic violence survivors, because a lot of the times they don't even know that they're in an abusive relationship. Like we said, they think that they're just fighting one another. And so I always let them know that it's one piece of the pie that they may be going through. And sometimes it's all of the pieces of the pie. And sometimes it could be financial abuse, like you said. It could be verbal abuse. It could be sometimes a lot of abusers. This is my point. I remember now. They try to, the survivor leaves, and then years later, they're still being abusive because of the fact that they still have to raise these kids together. So they are not physically hitting them anymore, but they're trying to have power and control over them, using the kids to relay messages, using the kids to be in the middle of it, talking to them like, I'm going to call DCFS on you. You're a bad mother. And so they still try to do domestic violence that way as well.
To try to control the situation.
Yep.
We're no longer in control. So they say, oh, you're a bad parent. I'm going to call DCFS. And then they send the mother through an emotional
cycle again. And it's still the cycle of violence because they're still trying to control them that way, using the kids to relay messages and everything. So, yeah.
Angie, I see Sasha Zoe. She's saying, yes. She's actually gone through that. She's gone through that where, and I remember it. And I remember watching my friend just struggle and just be so, it's like oppression. It's like, you're trying to tell me I can't raise these babies, but you want to say that when you got me pregnant. So most definitely in there. Oh, girl, slipped my mind. I had
Yeah, and I also had one lady where she was saying that she was a cigarette smoker, and she said she would put her cigarettes down and then he would move them somewhere else. And then she'd be like, did you move my cigarettes? And he'll be like, no, and you must be crazy. So we call that playing mind games with them. And so that they like to do that a lot as well, hide their keys. And back to your point earlier when you were saying that some people were saying, why did you leave? Why didn't you leave? When I took the 40-hour domestic violence training course, one of the things they had us do, they had us write, it was an exercise. They had us write 3 main important things on a piece of paper. And because my main question was, why won't they just leave? That was me. Why don't they just leave? I couldn't understand that part. So when we did this exercise, what they did was they walked around the room and then they said, they snatched a piece of the paper and was like, this is what the abuser has on it. I think I put on there my kids. I put my keys on there, my car keys. I can't remember what the third thing was, but these are some of the things that abusers hold against them. They'll take their car keys. They'll hold their kids hostage to make them stay. So after I saw that visually, it was a light bulb, like, okay, I get it now. But before then, I didn't get it.
Right. Right. And I think that one of the things that I remember when I was in abuse, it was such a mental mind game. And one of the things he would say was I was sleeping with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt almost, I'm talking about my female friends, like, okay. And I almost would feel like, wait a minute, but I'm sleeping with you, you know, I'm heterosexual. And almost made me feel like I had to prove to him that I wasn't doing what he was saying that I was doing. And it was like, I spent so much time like, okay, maybe if I prove it, maybe if I prove to him that I'm being faithful, or maybe if I prove to him that I'm not sleeping around, or maybe I prove. So I just spent so much energy. And then even when I left the relationship and I met my husband, I met him shortly after, I almost felt like I had to prove to him too that I love him, that I wouldn't cheat on him, that, you know, when one time my husband, he had to sit me down. And he said, excuse my language, I don't mean to be offensive, but I have to articulate it as he articulated it to me. He said, I don't know who that nigga was. I don't know about him, but I'm not like him. And it was like an aha moment for me. Like, you're not like this man. I'm free from this relationship and I don't have to act like I'm still in it. But even after you leave a domestically violent relationship, it's like you still have to retrain your whole mind. It is like you feel so brainwashed.
Yeah, for a long time you were in flight or fleet mode. So you were your body was so tense and so you had blinders on. And so once you got out of the relationship, those blinders had to slowly come off, and so that you can actually see, and that's why I always stress counseling. And not just regular counseling. I always stress domestic violence counseling, because they are going to help you go through those cycles of this different stages of with the counseling as well.
And just to kind of touch and agree with you on that, my therapist, the first thing when I described to her, when I ran through the list of the things that happened to me from my childhood to the abuse to the chronic illness, because I also had chronic pain on top of this, she said to me, it wasn't your fault.
No.
And I didn't know that. And I always like to tell, it's not, whoever is listening, if you are listening, it is not your fault.
No, not at all.
Not your fault. There is nothing that you could have done to deserve to be beat, to be manipulated, to be robbed, to be raped. Because in many cases, they would rape you. My ex-pimp tried to pimp me before.
They do that too.
Yeah.
They do that a lot too. Yeah.
I didn't even know what was going on, y'all. And I remember I think I was like 21, 20. And I was saying, I was sick. I was really, really sick. I was going to college and I was really, really sick. And I was laying down and he said, yeah, come someplace with me. I was like, okay. So I went and we ended up at this ratty hotel with this supposed to be pastor who apparently had saw me. My ex-boyfriend was a drug dealer. So he had sold him drugs, saw me and decided that he liked me and went to my ex-boyfriend and said, hey, I'll pay you for her. If she sleeps with me, I'll give you a certain amount of money. I'm not knowing any of this. Right. I don't know anything about this. But I remember sitting in a chair like this and a bed being behind me and in front of me a mirror. I'm sitting like, he left, he said to me, I'll be back. My ex-boyfriend said, I'll be back, and left me in a room by myself with this man. And this man, and through the mirror, I could see him masturbating. And I remember being so horrified and afraid and frozen and thinking to myself, if I sit still, he's not going to get off the bed and grab and rape me. And I say, if I sit still enough, nothing's gonna happen. And my ex, he was gone for about 45 minutes.
Jesus.
So, you know, I guess he was trying to give the pastor enough time to do what he wanted to do. And I remember just like, if I sit still, and I remember feeling sick and disgusted and afraid and like, what is happening? And then my ex-boyfriend he comes to pick me up, and I got in the car and I said, yeah, you know, I was like, yeah, he was doing this, and now I'm thinking my ex is going to avenge me. I didn't know that I was being set up. And I said, no, he's going to avenge me. He's going to go up in there and beat this man up.
Mm-hmm.
All the things, the joke was on me, and he had set it up. And he said, all you had to do was to give him some. I'm like, what? That's when I realized the joke was on me. And he had set me up, and I could have been raped. I could have been showed up. I could have been dead. The man was high. He's supposed to be a man, a quote unquote man of God. And I'm just like, but as he set me up and tried to
the blood kept you, baby.
And you know what when I was sitting there, as I was telling this story or repeating this story, it makes me think about my sister fasting and praying for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. That's the prayers.
Fasting and praying for me.
Mm-hmm.
My mom fasting and praying for me so that I would get out of this.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
It's hard to see your loved ones go through it, but I always tell them, pray, be a support.
It works.
Yes, it works.
It works. And I remember my sister's prayer working because I would sit back and sometimes in my quiet time, and I would think to myself, God would speak to me and he would say, you know, you need to leave, right? Mm-hmm. And I would just be pretending like I didn't hear him. He's like, you know, you need to leave, right? He said, you know, this. He was like, you know, you need to leave, right? And God always talked to me direct. I don't get that sugarcoat. He talks to me kind a lot, but because I'm hard-headed, he's very direct. He said, you know, if you stay here, you're going to die. Yeah. And I was just like, I know, but I can't get out. I could not figure out a way to leave. And that was a challenging part because you feel like you can't, there's no way out. But I want to tell you, everyone who is listening, there is a way out.
There is a way out.
God is a God who delivers. There is a way out. He will, if you can't create an escape plan, I am here to tell you, God will create one for you. You do not have to have it all figured out before you leave. It's nice to, but you do not have to have it all figured out. Do not.
And I know you were saying something about the church, and I always stress to get pastors need to send their people to the right people to get the right kind of counseling. Because they're not to get the right kind of help, because you never want to counsel a domestic violence survivor or in front of her abuser, because that could be very life-threatening, and that can also cause a confrontation for her if she says anything against him in that room while he's there.
You could kill her.
Yeah.
And you are so right. And I know women who have been beat after counseling, and I know women who have been emotionally abused. It is mind-boggling the type of women. Domestic violence does not have a choice of a type of woman that he decides from the upper echelon of women, rich women, poor women, smart women. It does not care.
The color, nothing at all. It doesn't care.
Color, doesn't care about anything. And to your point, when you said pastors need to refer people, that is absolutely correct. And I think that for me, when I would come out of it and then come into Christ, my thought was, Lord, I don't want my testimony to be about how I survived in Christ emotional abuse from my husband and wouldn't leave. You know, I didn't want that to be my testimony. And so even as leadership, even if you're not in a leadership capacity, please don't tell a woman to pray domestic violence away. Yes, pray.
Yeah, pray.
Please pray. because prayer changes. But the right the answer, and I'm telling, I love clergy. And please don't tell a woman that she can pray it away. That's not the right answer. The proper response is, like Kyisha said, let me listen. And then I've also found that's very effective for me is, how can I help you right now? What can I do for you right now? Because when you're in the moment and when you're telling your story, you may not know specifically what you need, but you may know what you need right now. You know, sometimes it might be just to listen. I was listening to Stacey Peterson. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Stacey Peterson case, but her husband was a Bolingbrook sheriff, works for the Bolingbrook Sheriff Department, and he murdered. Well, they can't find her. They can't find her body. She disappeared about maybe almost a decade ago. They can't find her body, but they were able to jail him for the murder of his second wife, I believe. And one of the things that the pastor, he said that he was on the live, and he said he regretted not asking the right questions. And he said something that was so powerful. He said that the wrong response by clergy and by the people of God is causing the women of God to perish. It's like it's murdering the women of God. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important. And I'm not bashing clergy, because, you know, I'm a church girl. I am. I love the Lord. I am a church girl. I don't know if y'all know that. I love God, if you can't tell. But I do believe firmly that we need to respond.
And I believe the body of Christ got everything. They got some of everybody in there. So they got somebody that will point the individual in the right direction. I do tell clergy to pray and to seek the right kind of help, because they don't have all the answers, but the body of Christ sure do. It's somebody there. It's somebody there.
You are so right. In the most obscure places, because I was reading too that most survivors or most victims, they're going to go to the church first, and they're going to say, "Hey, this is what is happening to me," and we can't. And it's our responsibility not to dismiss emotional abuse. If he's not hitting you, emotional abuse, financial abuse, what other type of verbal abuse? You know, we can't dismiss those type of abuses, because they are indeed it's abuse. Guys, we're going to get ready to wrap up, but I want to ask if anybody has any questions for Kyisha.
And I also want, I'm sorry, Charity. I also want to stress, I know we say it's women, but 1 out of 7 males do experience domestic violence, and they do go through it as well. And a lot of times men are looked upon, you know, as being weak if they let a woman, you know, abuse them. And a lot of time men don't even believe that other men are getting abused, but it does happen. It does happen. Okay.
It does. It definitely does. And you know what? I was visiting a church, and I thought they actually have a really, really great domestic violence ministry. And one of the things they have in each bathroom was just saying, if you're experiencing abuse, if you need something, they had these little sheets that you can tear. I thought that was such a clever, easy idea, because men are coming into the women's bathroom stall. But if you need help, here, take a sheet. And it was so inconspicuous. Even if you took a sheet, it didn't look like the number to the violence hotline, but it was just like a word of encouragement. If this is you, please feel free to take a sheet. And then they actually even had the pastor's name over who was in charge of women's ministry, or who was trained to handle domestic violence. And I so believe that it needs to be taught and trained in churches. So if you got a church and you want somebody to come out to talk to you, because churches have reached out because of COVID, it has been very difficult. But if you are a church and you're looking for more information, if you need brochures, if you would like just something that you can stick in your bathroom for women to tear out, inbox me. You can inbox Kyisha. Kyisha is super creative. She's so creative, so creative. Inbox Kyisha, inbox me. My website is going to pop up on the page, and you can visit my website. And then I am happy to help you. I'm a lot of resources. I have a lot, you know, and I'm grateful because people have helped me through this. I didn't do this by myself. I have advocates, friends, family, people that help me do what I do so that I can be a help to you, to your family. And also, even if you want prayer, even if you just want direction on how to pray for someone who is in a domestic violent relationship. My sister Crystal, she's actually going to be on one of my lives. We're going to talk about how to pray for someone in the relationship and how to support them. But Kyisha, before we go, did you want to say anything else before we pray?
No, I just work for South Suburban Family Shelter. We're in the South Suburban area. We serve Cook, and we also service Indiana. So feel free to get in contact with us. I'll give Charity our information as well, and feel free.
Yes, yes. I'm actually going to just close with prayer. Father God, we thank you, God. We thank you for this idea. We thank you even for the resources and how we can reach people who are not even in the same state or in the same place, oh God. God, we pray that you have been glorified through this ministry, through the things that have been said, oh God. We pray that every listener and everyone who's going to listen to this particular message is blessed by it and leaves with more information, things that they may not have known, oh God. God, I pray for every single person on this side that is listening right now, that they will be strengthened and empowered to do the right thing, oh God. God, that you would give them an understanding that even if they call the police, they are making a difference, oh God.
Yes,
I cancel the very assignment of the spirit of premature death, murder, domestic violence. We strip you of your strength. We call you out by name, and we strip you of your strength in the name of Jesus. I pray for Kyisha. I thank God for her ministry, oh God. I thank God for what she has poured into us on this live. God, we want you to know that we love you. We appreciate you. And ladies, I want to say this again, and gentlemen, there is always a way out. Yes. You were created for a purpose, and there is always a way out. I want to thank you. Hey, everybody, I didn't get to say hi. Hey, R.C. Riley, Evangelist Williams, Kristen, all the people that showed up. I appreciate you. I appreciate your comments, your questions. We love you, love you, love you. And we thank you so much. You guys have an amazing day.
Thank you, Charity. I love you.
I love you too,
Thanks for sharing your story.
Oh, girl, thank you for helping me. Bye, y'all.